post-production versus pre-production?
The vast majority just thinks about like, what am I going to talk about? They go on camera, they riff. If the concept of your show is riffing, perfect, nothing wrong with that at all. But if you want to then start elevating your content and be like, how can I support my audience? How can I help them a little bit more? I think those are elements that are worth like looking into it.
Right, you gotta look at the content and be like, is this content actually helping me create conversations?
My advice, if you are the creator or your team is creating, make sure that the people involved are enjoying the creation process.
Is the content that you're publishing aligning with the results that you want, right? Because you can be putting 1,000 pieces of content, but if at the end of the day, like, it's not helping you get closer to like that goal that you want, then it doesn't really matter.
Hi guys, welcome back to Content is Profit. We are back after a couple of weeks breaks. We had a hurricane. There's another coming at the time of this recording. We're all safe, family safe. Fonzie, man, you share some good news with the team today? No? You don't want to share it again?
No.
No? Okay.
We'll share it eventually. What do we got up for today?
I don't know. You tell me. You are bringing some awesome clips that we're going to react to. And like everything that we do is connected to turning your content into profit and some principles. And here we go. So I'm excited.
Yeah. They're not quite clips. They're snips from other podcasts that I've been listening to. And I think some of these are important just to discuss them.
Yeah. They
might bring value to you. You might have your own opinion. Let us know what it is. But I think a few of these are worth a little bit of a discussion. All right. Perfect. The first one is from an episode from Alex Hormozi's podcast, The Game, How I Gained 7.8 million followers in 40 months. So this little
7.4
million followers in 40 months.
In 40 months. Okay.
I know. He's talking like baby language there, 40 months. Is that when people say, oh, how old is your baby? Oh, it's 24 months. You mean 2 years? Yeah, he put that baby language in there. I think 40 months is definitely has more oomph to it than 3.5 years.
Yep. There we go. Copywriting lesson right there. Okay.
All right. Here we go.
But if you're trying to learn physics and there's whiz bangs and pop-ups and changing backgrounds, it's really hard to learn. And if that's the throughput or that's the point of the video, then it actually detracts rather than adds. And so the difference that I put in this example here is we have a background that changes colors while I'm teaching something. It does not help someone understand the subject matter better. Fundamentally, changing background color will not help anyone learn more. On the flip side, clarifying what words on a screen are, because maybe my handwriting's not that good, would help people understand. That's the difference. So overproduction to effective production. From distracting to enhancing. From visual effects to visualizing data. So instead of having flames behind me, it's what does this look like on a chart? So we can give relative scale, so we have scope, so we can show changes over time. And so that's how the visuals that did the best looked like. And then number 5, let's talk about pre-work for a second. So going from post-production to pre-search. So instead of saying, hey, let's just record something and then fix it in post, anybody who's in the media side knows what I'm talking about, 4 weeks of editing after, almost no prep to get a video out. Well, what if we did 4 weeks of research and then we have almost no editing because we thought of everything ahead of time? Well, guess what? The videos where we spent, we're like the hour-to-hour ratio is stupid, and I'll get to that in a second. But if we spend a quarter of the time that we used to spend on post in pre, we eliminate 90%, maybe 95% of our post-edit work and man hours. And for the business owners in the room, that's real cost. That's real savings.
All right.
I love it. I know what this video is from. Like, I think I watched it.
Yeah, I think this video is fairly popular. He made a presentation on YouTube talking about pretty much his transition from more value-tainment content, right, to just strictly educational content. And he was presenting the reasons why, trying to cut people's learning curve. But I thought that segment right there was very important. And there's actually like a few points in there. I think the point number 1 was, not just graphics for the sake of graphics and, animation and pattern interrupts, but like more purposeful, insightful ways to visualize what the person is doing or talking about. And then number 2, which is the main point that I wanted to talk, is post-production versus pre-production. And I mean, what he said, right? Like a quarter of, an hour spent on pre-production that I usually was spent in post-production, like can save you so much time.
Absolutely.
Right. So I think that's pretty interesting, because I think a lot of people just tackle it as, all right, which is good onto a point. Let me jump in front of the camera, create, and then we'll figure out in post-production. And I think that is one of the challenges too when creating podcast clips, right? Which is people often is like, all right, I'm going to have my podcast episode, and then it's like, right, pull out the clips from the podcast, right? Rather than maybe structuring everything, like the podcast with like, where the clips are going to be, which segments you're going to talk about that maybe you can put somewhere else. I think there's real value in pre-production. Yeah.
I think a lot of the big problem that maybe we see with like newer creators or people trying to, first is trying to stay consistent, right, with their creation or like what they want to do. And also,
so if I can take the quarter of the time, and I can get
play the game by itself.
But also not knowing I don't know what I don't know type of deal, right? And also like it can be very overwhelming if you haven't ever created type of content and having conversations with editors or the marketing messages that we get bombarded every single time with, like what type of content is like the secret content that's going to help you, grow the most. It can also be very overwhelming, right? So, it's no secret. Like I'm a fan of start creating yourself and start going through that process. So you start understanding, but to your point, and then to the clips point, it gets to a point where once you conquer the basics, right? It's almost like get it out of the way, out of the system, you can start engineering your process. Because last Friday we recorded this workshop with Deidre from Capshow, and that was one of the topics of a lot of the people that come to them as a solution for their podcast or like copywriting and different things is also they need maybe the advantage of the clips, right? And for some people, clips might be a good solution. For some others, it might not be a good solution because there's no structure, right? It might just be like a random piece of information that's placed in there, and like, what is the objective of that clip type of deal, right?
Yeah.
So like you said, like pre-planning the episode, and this is based on the scenario that you want to do. If you go from long form content podcast episode to clips, how can you structure the main episode? And on our side, we can definitely do better on that side. Or maybe you just don't do the long form content. If you're actually focusing on short form content, those clips have to be engineered from that. And I wrote here, this is not on the clip, but I did see a documentary once with Disney and Pixar and the animation movies that they make. And they have the entire movie ready to rock and roll, like with all the scenes and all the changes in writing in the script, not only the script, but also how the visuals, the storyboards, and then the process start before like the editing and like the creation starts. And that approach, it opened your eyes for a lot of content creators today, because the vast majority just thinks about like, what am I going to talk about? They go on camera, they riff. If the concept of your show is riffing, perfect, nothing wrong with that at all. But if you want to then start elevating your content and be like, how can I support my audience? How can I help them a little bit more? I think those are elements that are worth like looking into it.
Yeah, I mean, it's storyboarding is just part of the process when creating movies, right? They do it, save time, they go to set and they're not like, all right, we got the lines, let's see how we're going to shoot this. No, like they know all the shots they're going to do, right? Maybe they have some extra shots just in case, but it is part of the process. And I think, it just talks about being more intentional with the usage of time, right? Especially, again, in the world of podcasts, somebody might record a podcast and then they tell their team, hey, pull me 10 clips. I'm like, okay, well, out of those 10 clips, actually, how many are good, right? Like if we put intention into this, like maybe we can actually get out 3 really good clips. But again, we're going to have to spend a lot of time, because the way this episode was engineered, we're going to have to spend a lot of time into like finding those moments. Maybe we have to rearrange, parts of the dialogue, not to take away context, but just to like add more value and clarity to the person that is listening and getting the message. Because, it's very difficult sometimes to compress a 30-minute episode into bits of 1 minute, right? 2-3 minutes, right? Like you're taking away a lot of context. So that takes a lot of time in the post-production. And like people don't really understand that. There are tools that, AI tools that you say, all right, pull me out a clip. And sure, they'll find clips, but I see it more as like, they're finding you a little highlights, right? Like, oh, this is a cool phrase I want to remember. And they find a highlight, but is the clip actually valuable, right? And again, we go back to intention, what worked for some people or some others that it doesn't work. Yeah. But, a 1 minute clip of just two sentences might work better for somebody that already has the influence. But somebody that might not have the influence, they might need to put a little bit more resources and, intention into creating those things. So, maybe the value of doing pre-production, right? A little bit more research where you're going to say certain things and specifically that that's going to be a clip, like that might be more valuable to you than just let me put out a bunch of volume and then give it to a post-production team and like let them figure out something. Yeah.
I think, just this morning, I personally was working in our process from like podcasts to blog, leveraging some of the tools and the partners that we have. And as I was like writing, here's our format, right? We have a full episode. For each episode, we grab 4 clips, which at the moment are very, I guess, tier C, like very just like me or Fonzie saying something with, captions and that's it. And then on the back end, what I've been looking at is, okay, what are some outliers of these clips that we put out there? Because we're putting about 12 clips every single week. And from those, when we write the captions, some of them, for example, the last one that we did was about the 80-20 rule, right? 80% of things that, have been working or are grabbing some traction in your platform, and then 20% of things that you might be experimenting. So for example, those maybe higher production clips, more intentional clips, different things. And the clip itself makes sense as a conversation, but then when we wrote the caption, we can turn that caption into maybe a 3-step process or a 3-step thing that can be scripted as a intentional clip, right? Where we can be filming, phase number 1 can be here in the office. Phase number 2 can be like on the other side, or maybe we can show a graphic, and it could be a little bit more intentional. And that's a way or a process that people can follow to do this. Almost like, pushing some content out, see what resonates, or you can do that internally. Out of this episode, maybe this is a process that we can do intentionally, or different things. You can also do that with other content, like what we say with this clip with Alex Hormozi. Maybe you listen to something that's relevant to your industry, and then you restructure that into a more intentional clips. Keep in mind, your resources, right? Whether that's your time or your team. Ideally, you have a team that you can maybe, give this idea and they can run with it. There's a girl on YouTube. I forget the name of her channel, but she does these incredible experiences where it's like, hey, she was invited for an F1 paddock, for example. She was explaining the physics of an F1 car, or she did like almost like a review of an astronaut suit the other day, and her clips are very high on graphics, right? Because she's explaining these very complex topics, but the graphics and the animation makes it super accessible, and it helps you understand the clip. And I think the last clip I was looking at a review, the last 10 clips that she posted on Shorts has an average of 10 million views. Granted, she is a big creator, but one of the points that she was pointing is like the intentionality of these clips is like, how can we help our audience understand better this concept? And for them in that specific case was the graphics that they were attaching to the information that she was sharing. So super interesting, right? So if you want to take your content to the next level, I think those are elements that you should be looking at and experimenting, right? Trying it out.
Yeah. I think I'm going to start a campaign and say, stop the spray and pray. It's going to be my next campaign. So let us know what you think about that clip from Hormozi. Personally, I really liked it. Really resonated when I saw it. I was like, you know what? It does need more intention. I mean, I think the way I personally consume is an indicator of like the way kind of like actual content. I think it's a signal, right? Of this is content that gets my attention, you know, and I think therefore it will get people's attention as well. Other people that we like to serve, because in a way they're kind of like very similar to us, you know, they have very similar thought process. And I rarely, honestly, just consume like straight off the podcast clips if they're like that. Like they have to be intentionally crafted for me to like pay attention to those.
I think that's where we differ, because I do get sucked in sometimes with the very simple clips. And I don't know.
But like even the stuff that you send me online, you know, like it's different. It's different stuff.
I know what I sent. I mean, what I send you is not like personal growth content stuff. It's funny stuff.
I know, which is another thing. I'm like, I realize a lot of times I used to go to social media to like disconnect my brain from reality and just like,
yeah, my feed is totally different.
Numb my mind.
My feed is not like research based thing. It's probably all comic stuff at the moment. Because I just go there to
so like actually, how many actual like clips are you consuming?
Well, the ones that the shows that pop up, you know, Escuela de Nada is a good example, right? A Venezuelan show, like they do the clips like that, and I enjoy it, and it's
but it's more entertainment based. It's comedy.
Correct. Again, I think we can agree to disagree, but I do, you know, here's an example, a visual that came to mind, right? Obviously, you know, lately I've been very into sim racing, and I've been very fortunate that I have people in the family or close friends that I've inherited some equipment, right? So there was a point where I inherited this equipment. It was like top level, like probably top of the line, most expensive thing. And I tried the thing. The thing. It felt good. It felt good on racing. It's like incredible. So imagine that's like the very high quality, you know, content that we put out. That's the equivalent, right? Then this person asked for that equipment back because they needed it. That's so okay. We returned it. And I got back, let's say a Type C type of, you know, it's good equipment. It works, but it didn't feel as good. Like it was like, oh man, like this is, you know, whatever. Like I could raise the first world problems, by the way. I'm not complaining. I'm very thankful. It's just like, it didn't feel as good as the other one, right? So maybe that's like that category C type of content that sometimes we see. And then this other person came and that person was like, hey, here's some new equipment. You can go use it. And now we went back up on, you know, how it felt. It felt better than the one that I had before. So, but that doesn't mean that equipment that I didn't like because maybe it was, you know, more economical or like it felt not as good as the other one. That doesn't mean that equipment is not valuable for somebody else. Right? So somebody else will grab that and maybe that's an upgrade for them. Maybe it feels really good for them. So in my eyes, I think we internally need to experiment. And it's a mix of, hey, are we helping our audience with the topic of this content? Am I, as a creator, feel proud to put something like that out there, right? Am I happy? And I think that's where your personal feeling comes in, like with our content. I mean, we both agree that we can do a lot better, right? With our content, maybe with our clips. And it starts with us. It starts with, you know, how we give information on this podcast. It starts how we structure it. It starts with capacity. It starts with, you know, our team, different things, different elements. But also that doesn't mean that if we put a clip like that cannot help somebody that maybe runs into that clip randomly and be like, oh, this is quite interesting. Maybe let me learn more about these guys, or maybe let me tune into one of the episodes and so on. So to me, that's my personal opinion. I don't know, like, does that translate into like achieving the goals that we want to achieve?
There you go. I think that's a question, right? Which is like, why are you creating content in the first place? Right? Like, is the content that you're publishing aligning with the results that you want? Right? Because you can be putting 1,000 pieces of content, but if at the end of the day, like, it's not helping you get closer to like that goal that you want, then it doesn't really matter, right? At the end of it, unless if your goal is like, I just want to put the content out there, it's like, cool. Then you're putting 1,000 pieces of content out there. That's absolutely amazing, right? But if you own a business and you're like, you want to potentially, I'm guessing you want to create conversations, right? You got to look at the content and be like, is this content actually helping me create conversations, right? Like something I think a good example is, I was thinking about it this morning, which is we've moved away a lot from doing conversations on the show, right? Like having interviews. I would say it's like a 50-50 split at the moment. And in the past, I mean, it was well known, we've said on the show multiple times, like that's our channel to acquire new customers. In the past, at the beginning, we would bring them on, have the conversation, build rapport, create content for them specifically, send it to them. And a lot of them were very impressed and, they wanted to talk back to us. Then, circumstances change. We were like, all right, let's dabble with like content between just us, which just so you know, I enjoy a lot doing. I think it's a lot of fun doing content by ourselves. But we stopped in a bit, like doing the guest. And now also the guests that we have, we just create content for us for the most part. We stopped doing kind of like those guest assets that we used to send them, right? And we can agree that maybe the acquisition channel has, changed for us and it's not the same. It's not the same panorama that we had, previously when we were doing like guest assets. So in my mind, I'm like, is it serving the goal, right? Like, do these solo episodes are serving the goal, which was grow the agency, right? For example. So I was like, interesting. And it just gets you thinking. I was like, well, maybe we should do more of the guest assets, right? Like, is the content, that we are putting out for ourselves, is the purpose of that to get more customers or just to have a pretty feed, right? Then if it's to get more customers, the guest assets were probably being more efficient than the other ones. So I was like, well, maybe should we shift our efforts to the guest assets? So I think it goes back to what is your goal? Think about it. What is your goal with creating content? And that's probably going to lead you to the right set of answers on what you should be doing, right? Like, are you posting 1,000 times a day, right? 10,000 times a day? Or maybe you're going to be the person that posts one time a week, but you spend, kind of like Alex Hormozi said, most of your time doing the pre-production, the research, structuring your things. So you kind of like maybe magnify the opportunity of getting people's attention, right? And who knows, at the end of the day, that might not even work. Mm-hmm. And you might that might not even work. And at the end of the day, all you got to do is like, well, you know what? Maybe I don't publish content and I just focus on outreach, because outreach is what has been working in my business, right? And like you focus on that thing. But, not every creator, honestly, out there is extremely successful. We can dive into so many things out there. I think this, this has a lot of tangents, but
I think to close out, I guess, the idea and probably the episode at this point, it's find a process and find a flow that you feel comfortable with, right? And I think like depends on the levels, right? Depends on like who you are in the company. It depends on your resources. But if you're like brand new, 100%, like remove friction from creation, put stuff out there, put the content out there. If it's your first podcast, this probably won't be your last podcast, right? You will learn a ton and then you will improve upon that. If you're kind of mid and you have a fractional team and you have some people that can help you on the production side, have a conversation with them. Be like, hey guys, objective is X, how can we get to that point? If the objective is for people to watch more of your videos because you have a message and you want them to learn from those videos, how can you get to do that, right? Like, how do you read the data behind like YouTube, for example, or how can you read the data behind your publishing platform on long form, on podcast, so you can help and get people through the finish line, right? If the objective of your content is more of a direct response type of content, like how do we improve our copywriting skills and our scripting skills so we can keep attention and move people from watching the video into taking action, for example, right? There's many things. And at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with experimenting with your content and different styles. Just keep in mind that there's a trade-off, right? Like on what type of content that you're creating and what type. I think my personal advice we owe a lot to the show, like whether it's perfect or not perfect.
Yeah.
And my personal advice is find something that you enjoy creating. I mean, these conversations, we enjoy having them. The conversation with the people that come to the show, we enjoy having them, despite of like whatever results they can get us in the back. But it's provided us with a ton of opportunities. And it might be to the point that your business might need a new opportunity. I might need a new system. I might need a new process at the end of the day. But my advice, if you are the creator or your team is creating, make sure that the people involved are enjoying the creation process. Good?
Yeah.
Any last thoughts?
I don't think I'm going to do the other recordings. I think that one was fine.
Let's go.
Just one.
Yes. All right, we'll save that for another episode reserved. All right,
That's
guys,
good.
With that said, thank you so much for tuning to the Contents Profit podcast. Go ahead and follow the show in your favorite podcasting platform and on social media at BizBrosGo.
That is right. If today's podcast helped you move one step closer towards your goal, please don't forget to share this episode. And of course, don't forget to leave a 5-star review. See ya.
Bye, guys.